This
The
land is
wind
claimed.
came
State your
first,
purpose.
We bow to no
crawling
one.
low across
you
the
will
prairie
fall.
like it
We
was
shall
afraid to
see.
be seen. It brushed against the gray boards of the old ranch house, whispered through the dry grass, and rattled the loose hinge on the barn door that hadn't been closed in years. Eli McCrae sat on the porch, his chair creaking under a weight that had nothing to do with age. He watched the horizon the way men do when they've outlived everyone who ever waited for them to come home. Once, people knew his name. Once, his boots shook saloon floors and his rifle decided how borders were drawn. Once, he had ridden beside men who sang too loud and died too young. Then the wars ended, the trails dried up, and the world learned how to forget cowboys. So did Eli. He stayed when everyone else left, stayed when the town folded in on itself, stayed when the land went quiet and the nights grew louder than gunfire. For 15 years, no one crossed his gate except dust and memory. He liked it that way. Silence didn't lie. Silence didn't beg. That was before the 5 women appeared at the edge of his land. He saw them at dusk, silhouettes against a bleeding sky. 5 figures walking on foot, wrapped in worn shawls, their steps slow but deliberate. Not drifters, not thieves, something heavier, something desperate. Eli didn't reach for his rifle. He hadn't in years, but his hand found the scar on his left side, a habit from another life. They stopped at the fence. None crossed it. That's when he knew. Only people who respect land stop at the line. The eldest stepped forward. Her hair was silvered, braided tight, her eyes dark with grief that had aged faster than time. She spoke in careful English, every word chosen like it cost her something. "We are widows," she said. "Apache. Our husbands were taken, our homes burned. Winter is coming." She swallowed. Pride bent but did not break. "We ask for shelter, only shelter." Eli studied them one by one. A young woman clutching a baby wrapped in rags. Another with a limp she tried to hide. One whose hands shook, not from fear, but from hunger held too long. The 5th said nothing. Her gaze steady, unreadable. Widows. He knew that word too well. For a long moment the wind spoke for him. Then Eli stood, bones protesting, voice rough like it hadn't been used for kindness in years. "You can stay the night," he said. "That's all I promise." The eldest bowed her head. Gratitude without submission. That night, the ranch breathed again. They slept in the barn at first, refusing the house. Eli noticed. Respect again. He left blankets without a word. By morning, a fire burned where none had burned in years. Coffee boiled. Bread baked from flour he hadn't touched since his hands stopped shaking enough to cook. Days turned into weeks. They didn't ask for more. They worked, fixed fences, tended the garden he'd let die. The children laughed, soft at first, like they were afraid sound might bring death back with it. Eli watched from a distance, confused by something dangerous stirring in his chest. Purpose. At night, when the fire crackled, the eldest woman told stories of rivers, of stars, of men who died standing so their families could run. Eli listened from the porch, pretending not to. One night she spoke directly to him. "You are alone by choice," she said gently. Eli stared into the dark. "Ain't the same as lonely." She smiled, sad and knowing. "Sometimes it is." The peace didn't last. It never does. Riders came one morning, hooves tearing the earth like an accusation. Men with rifles and law badges that meant nothing out here. They claimed the land, said the widows were trespassers, said Eli was harboring fugitives. Eli stood between them and the barn. "I retired," he said calmly. "Didn't die." The lead rider laughed. Then he saw Eli's eyes. Men like that recognize legends too late. The first shot never came because Eli fired first. The fight was fast, brutal, final. Dust, blood, echoes. When it ended, 3 riders lay still. The rest fled, fear louder than gunfire. Eli stood breathing hard, hands steady like they used to be. The widows watched in silence. That night, Eli spoke to the camera of your audience without ever breaking the story. His voice heavy and real. Some stories ain't just told, they're carried. If you feel this one, pass it on. Share it. And if you don't want these stories to die like the men who lived them, subscribe. The fire cracked. The fifth woman finally spoke. You protected us, she said. Now we protect you. Winter came hard, but the ranch did not fall. Snow piled high. Wolves circled but never crossed the line. The widows hunted. Eli taught the children to shoot, to ride, to read the land like a living thing. Laughter returned, not fragile anymore, real, defiant. Then the army came, not riders this time. Soldiers, orders, papers. The land was wanted. The widows were to be removed. Eli walked out alone. I've buried enough people for this soil, he said. You'll have to bury me too. The commander hesitated. Behind Eli, 5 Apache widows stood shoulder to shoulder, rifles raised, children watching from the porch. History blinked and looked away. The soldiers left. Spring followed. Eli no longer sat alone on the porch. The ranch became a place of shelter, of stories, of second chances, a place where grief didn't own the future. Eli McCrae never remarried, but he was no longer alone. And when he finally died years later, he was buried on the hill overlooking the land he defended, not as a retired cowboy, not as a legend, but as a man who chose to stand one last time. And the widows? They stayed, because some shelters become homes, and some homes become forever. The first thaw came with a lie. Snow still clung to the shaded parts of the valley, but the sun warmed the ranch yard enough to fool a man into believing winter had loosened its grip. Eli McCrae felt it in his bones before he saw it in the sky. Trouble always announced itself that way, quiet, polite, pretending it had no intention of staying. He stood at the fence line just after dawn, boot heel pressed into softening earth, eyes narrowed toward the southern road. The widows were already awake. They always were. Loss teaches you to greet the morning like an enemy, early, alert, ready. The fifth woman, the quiet one, Naya, joined him without a sound. She had learned his habits, the way he'd learned hers, when to speak, when silence carried more weight. They will come again, she said, not asking. Eli nodded. They always do. What she didn't say was that this time would be different. The riders who fled months ago hadn't just run. They'd talked. Fear travels faster than truth, and the version of Eli McCrae now moving through the territory was not the retired ghost living alone with his regrets. He was being spoken of as a man who had chosen a side when the world wanted him quiet, and men who choose sides invite reckoning. By mid-morning, the ranch was alive. Children chased one another between fence posts, laughter bouncing off the barn walls. Smoke rose from the cook fire. The eldest widow, Atsa, knelt beside the youngest child, teaching him how to shape clay into something that might survive being fired. Eli watched it all like a man memorizing a place he might lose. He had lived long enough to know happiness doesn't ask permission. It arrives unannounced and dares you to protect it. That afternoon, a rider appeared alone. No badge, no uniform, just a man in a clean coat riding a tired horse. He stopped well short of the gate and raised his hands before Eli even stepped into view. "Name's Caldwell," the man called. "I'm here to talk." Eli didn't move. Talking's expensive. Caldwell swallowed, cheaper than blood. They sat on opposite sides of the fence, the land itself a witness. Caldwell spoke of papers filed, of pressure from the railroad, of prom. Ices made in rooms Eli had never stepped foot in. The ranch sat on a stretch of land now considered inconveniently occupied. "You're being offered compensation," Caldwell said carefully, "enough to live out your days in comfort." Eli laughed once, sharp and humorless. Comfort ain't the problem. Caldwell's gaze drifted toward the barn, where the widows worked. They complicate matters. Eli's eyes hardened. They are the matter. The offer expired at sundown. That night, the wind returned, not the whispering kind, the kind that carries omens. Atsa gathered everyone by the fire. Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a truth none of them wanted. "We have been hunted before," she said. "Running keeps you alive, standing tells the world who you are." She looked at Eli. "This land has taken your blood. That means something." Eli felt the weight of every year he'd tried to disappear press against his ribs. He had buried men for less than what stood before him now. "If you stay," he said, "you'll be fighting with me, not behind me." Naya met his gaze. "We know." Dawn broke red. They came in numbers this time. Not soldiers, not law. Men with contracts and guns, hired certainty behind their eyes. Eli counted them without trying. Too many for a fair fight. Just enough for a legend. The first shot shattered the morning. What followed wasn't chaos. It was precision born of shared purpose. The widows moved like a single breath, covering, signaling, protecting the children first. Eli anchored the line, rifle steady, memory guiding his hands where age could not. Men fell. Others hesitated. Fear returned, thicker than smoke. When it was over, the ground was torn and quiet. The kind of quiet that settles after something irreversible. Eli sank to one knee, blood soaking his sleeve. Naya was there instantly, pressing cloth to the wound, eyes fierce. "You're not done," she said. He believed her. Words spread faster than fire, not of the fight, but of what it represented. A place where people were not erased quietly, where widows were not moved aside, where an old cowboy had decided the last chapter of his life would be written in defense, not retreat. Travelers began to arrive, families displaced, orphans, the unwanted. The ranch changed again, expanding not in size, but in meaning. Work was shared, food was earned, stories were traded like currency. Eli spoke less, listened more. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the children slept, he turned toward the fire and let his voice carry, not just to the people beside him, but to those listening somewhere beyond the flames. "Stories like this don't survive on their own," he said quietly. "If this one matters to you, pass it on, share it, and stay with us. Subscribe, because there are still stories worth standing for." Years passed. Eli aged. The widows did not leave. They built homes, not just shelters. The land flourished under hands that respected it. The ranch became a boundary not of ownership, but of belonging. When Eli finally laid down for the last time, it was not alone. The room was full. Hands held his. Voices thanked him not for saving them, but for seeing them. Outside, the wind moved gently through the grass. Not like a warning, like a promise. And the ranch stood, still standing. Because sometimes the bravest thing a man can do after a lifetime of fighting is choose what's worth defending at the end.